the current pandemic that we've seen that erupted around March has been pretty rough lately. And, well, we're trying to live with it and try to really accept a new normal with face masks and all. But with this threat to humanity, we're forgetting a larger one that we've had for the last decade or so, and that issue has been climate change. Climate change has always been a huge imminent threat to us, but it's more it's more of a threat now than ever. It's actually probably at its worst, and so that's why it's so significant because we're at a really important part where if you don't do anything really, we're going to see a huge wave of extinction with some certain species, and eventually it's going to come affect us heavily. I mean, we've already seen it with the wildfires and droughts and any other calamities that are caused by this by climate change. And so that's why I believe the U.S. government must absolutely do something to treat it, or at least treat it, and to some certain extent stop climate change. It's absolutely important that we really try our best to get rid of it. It really is life or death here, and that's why it's so important that we really talk about this, especially today with this pandemic and how we responded to that. It really will show how we will respond to the climate change issue. And so, yeah, firstly, we're going to go through the problems with climate change, essentially exactly what has been caused because of climate change, and we can go into why climate change is happening and why it's still continuing. And after that, we're going to go ahead and go to the solutions into how we can prevent climate change from changing so drastically our futures, and maybe how we can actually reverse its effects. And so, primarily, we're going to go into the problems with climate change. So, as we've seen, according to the National Catholic Reporter in June 2020, there's actually a correlation with COVID-19 and climate change. That's what I mentioned before, is that even though we have this issue, it's actually been somewhat kickstarted because of climate change. So according to David Horan, who wrote a book in this article, he says that because of the warming, this actually has a direct link with a larger outbreak of COVID-19. And as to why previous plagues are sort of in this rhythmic pattern now, as we've seen, usually every 8 to 10 years we have we have a disease that pops up. For example, swine flu, SARS, Zika virus, Ebola. These diseases are coming at a higher rate because of climate change and the warming of the weather. It boosts their spread, and it becomes more novel, essentially. It's because there's a direct link with that. There's a good correlation that's been proven, essentially. But that's just one problem that's been sprouted out because of climate change. Other problems include, according to a congressional document from September 2019, it has caused record heat waves. It has caused major flooding. We've seen, especially in the southern east, and we've seen sea level rise. And lastly, extended droughts and longer wildfires. And I believe you can all remember the one a year ago, especially in California, devastated a huge amount of property and land. And that's just one simple little event that's been caused by climate change. And those two are really the major problems that we're dealing with right now. Great examples: disease and natural disasters. It's been an exponential rate because of climate change. And so we can go as to how this is all coming into fruition. Why is this happening, essentially? Well, according to U.S. Fed News in September 2019, it's because of the fact that we extract 90 billion tons of natural resources yearly from the planet, and it leads to a biodiversity loss and water loss. And so how does this connect with climate change? Essentially, because we're using so many resources at such a given time, we're using more machinery, greenhouse gas emissions, etc., to really not give the planet enough time to recover from this. If we get too much of it, it's not enough time to replace it. It gives us in a position of risk of losing resources, and it also gives a position of risk for the habitat and environment. Because we're extracting so many resources, there's a water loss, and there's also a bigger risk of causing a disaster essentially. So that's one way or one reason as to why climate change is still a thing is because we're getting way too many resources, and that leads to a larger output of greenhouse gases, larger output of trash and other outputs that's been caused by humanity. And another cause to the climate change has been, according to Interpress source, was the current world economy and how that works. So with the current world economy, majority of businesses and industries are really fossil fuel focused, meaning that they use carbon, they use oil to essentially power their machinery and power their ways of extracting resources. And by using this fuel source, it creates, like I said, large amounts of greenhouse gases. And that greenhouse gas is incredibly vital because it traps in the warmth that's been given off by the sun, which then leads to climate change, essentially. And if we can try to remove that focus, that would help a lot. But as of right now, the problem is that we focus way too much on this, especially here in the U.S. We don't really use enough renewable sources. And speaking of renewable sources, they're actually a good way of solving this issue. So, according to a congressional doc from May 2019, the Clean Energy for America Act encourages clean energy. It reduces taxes for those who are using clean energy, and it essentially taxes businesses or people who are responsible for fueling the usage of fossil fuels. And this act is essentially trying to encourage people to stop using fossil fuels, to stop using products created by fossil fuels, and try to really focus on producing goods through renewable sources. And this act, it tries to essentially change human behavior, change the way we consume, and change the way we try to produce in order to be more renewable and to encourage those businesses to go through those methods. And that would really help. It would really help, make people change their ways. And so, specifically, we can go to another example here in Los Angeles, according to Los Angeles Times in May 2019, where essentially that city is trying to go clean. LA is trying to be 100% green by 2045, and by then they're obviously going to need to go through renewable sources only, and that means we're going to try to cut off as many machinery, cars, and industries that are dependent on fossil fuels, and rather use cleaner energy like electric or energy used by air or hydro electric methods. Essentially, just any way but carbon or oil. And that's just one example. LA is a big city, and if they do go 100% by then, it's definitely going to help a lot, especially in that area. It would really be helpful. And so, yeah. And a last source for a solution is from Targeted News Service in July 2018, is that essentially we actually add more protection to farmland, because unbeknowingly, even though farmlands usually have cows or animals or any other products that produce a lot of methane and waste, it's actually a lot better that we protect those farmlands and protect land for farms instead of using it for living or for like a citywide. Essentially, protect these farms and protect this land in order to be useful for farmlands instead of using it for city based, because apparently an acre of city, it produces a lot more waste, greenhouse gases, and pollution compared to an actual acre of land, let's say on a farmland. And so we've seen here in, for example, in New York, actually, they've been investing millions of dollars into farmlands, into ensuring that they keep this property, because compared to, like I said, farmland produces less waste compared to a city or to a apartment residential area. Yeah, residential area. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a lot less waste being produced. And so if we have these protections in place, we can produce less waste and therefore add less to the current climate change. And so that pretty much wraps up what solutions we have, and as to how we can try to really really ease our way into stopping climate change, because of course it's such a huge global issue, and it really is difficult to get everyone rounded up to go fight for it. But these small ways that really, these small solutions and these small methods really do help a lot, and it does contribute to stopping climate change and to ensuring that we do have a better future. Because if we can survive a pandemic, I'm pretty sure we can survive a climate change, and we can try to put our efforts in as humanity to really pull through this. Thank you very much.